Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menonton rakaman agenda Awani khas. Ada sesuatu unit yang ditubuhkan khas oleh PBB, Pertubuhan Bangsa-Bangsa Bersatu, untuk memberikan khidmat nasihat kepada Setiausaha Agungnya iaitu Ban Ki-moon dalam usaha untuk mencari apakah pelan pembangunan terbaik untuk masyarakat dunia selepas 2015. And because of that, I now would like to move to English. I would like to welcome my honoured guests. They are part of that unit I just described to you, the Scientific Advisory Board to the Secretary General of the United Nations, which brings science into global development policies. And I've had the opportunity of moderating a session. Now I would like to bring out certain key things from there. Closest to me, Professor Dr. Maria Ivanova from Bulgaria. You are the co-director, Center for Governance and Sustainability, McCormack Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies, University of Massachusetts, Boston. Thank you so much for making time. There's a lot of things to ask you. I hope we have enough time to look at the matters in hand. But I guess you also would have to represent gender empowerment in this particular discussion. We didn't have to discuss that today. I also have Professor Carlos Nobre. Thank you very much for making time. You are the National Secretary for R&D Policies at the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation of Brazil. And of course, everything I Google about would say that you are one of Brazil's best known climate scientists, and that's a very crucial part of the Sustainable Development Goals. So I guess if I can start, I always ask this question to the SAB members. We've gone through the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, turn of the century to 2015, and now we're ending 2015, and now we're looking at what's post-2015. So what have been the best lessons learned from MDGs to move to SDGs, and how would they answer the pressing, complex, dynamics of problems and opportunities that we have for life as we know it now on planet Earth? Maybe you can start first.
Sure. Thank you very much for hosting us on this show. It's really an honor to be able to reach out to your audience and connect with the people of Malaysia. To address your question about the MDGs and the SDGs, the Millennium Development Goals that are expiring this year, and the Sustainable Development Goals that will be adopted this year, I think we have learned quite a few lessons from the Millennium Development Goals. One is that goals matter. Goals are important. When we set global goals, we have something to aspire to. Yes. And it has mobilized humanity, in a sense, to achieve those goals. Two, we have also learned that because goals matter, when you set your sight on a certain goal, you might neglect others. Okay. Therefore, now with the Sustainable Development Goals, you see that we have gone from 8 Millennium Development Goals to 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And a lot of people would criticize, oh, it's too many. But if you think they are now universal, they're for all of humanity, for all countries, can we agree on 5, 10, 15 goals for the whole planet? I don't think so. 17 is still not a large number. Yes. And yet they represent a consensus among political leaders and among civil society that these are important issues that we all commit to, and that we will collectively aspire to in our various different ways as countries. So I actually see the increase in the number of goals as a positive reflection, because if you also look at the process of creating the MDGs and the SDGs, the first one was expert-driven. Yes. It was behind closed doors. A small group of people decided what the goals will be. The second one was an open political process. It was created by an open working group was created that was supposed to be 30 countries. Yes. In reality, it was 70 countries. And countries decided to share seats, which to me shows the willingness and the desire of countries to be engaged in setting these global goals collectively.
In 2000, not many things were happening in terms of advancing the Agenda 21. agreed upon in Rio 1992, particularly with respect to two of the conventions, climate and biodiversity. So I think people correctly picked those areas where there was no controversy. And so those 8 goals are really resolving some of the basic underdevelopment issues. I think there was no disagreement on the metrics.
Okay.
And of course there was a very good learning process, and most countries, including Malaysia, including my own country, Brazil, did very well in looking at those goals and developing policy, educational policies, gender policies, health policies, and I think most countries did very well. But it was necessary to go one step further. So Sustainable Development Goals are, and I hope they will be approved, and the process will start implementation for good. They are really trying to go back to 1992 and see what was not accomplished.
Okay.
Much more comprehensive, holistic, much more difficult. So, but I'm very optimistic that now having metrics, having indicators, will give proper guidance to countries, although it's much more difficult than the original 8 goals.
Can we also say it's more inclusive even from the beginning, not just from the input into the goals, but in how an issue like poverty should be tackled? We can't just tackle poverty by looking at GDPs, for example. We must look at abstaining and trying to prevent conflicts, for example. And we must look at inequality of wealth creation. Maybe the world is producing enough, but it's not being shared enough, for example. Can I put it that way too, so that the layman can look at it that wherever I am, no matter if I'm within a marginalized community, if SDGs are carried out well, I will be represented. My future, my family's future will be in there. Can we sum it up also like that, as a layman's way of looking at it? Because maybe some felt from MDGs that yes, it was looking at poverty, but it doesn't address maybe things that are discussed in the Security Council of the United Nations, for example.
That's a very good way of putting it, and I wish that we would be able to accomplish that vision. I certainly do. So perhaps if you communicate it to more and more people that way, then they can hold their governments responsible and accountable.
Okay.
That yes, put in place strategies that would allow for that to come through.
I have to go for the first break, but once we are back, let's link that to the implementation at a country level, because at the end of the day, the broad SDG goals can be seen or not seen inside the policies and implementation of every government and countries around the world. So if we were to empower civil society of countries around the world, they can use a checklist to look at the 17 goals, maybe 169 targets, so-called, that's set, and hey, is my government really looking at that, or are they not, and why? So let's use the case study of Bulgaria, Brazil, and I can throw in maybe some examples from Malaysia right after this break. You are still watching a special recorded session of Agenda Awani, and this is once in a lifetime opportunity for me to sit down with members of the Scientific Advisory Board that is consulting for the Secretary General of the United Nations in bringing science and scientific approach to trying to define the Sustainable Development Goals and its implementation. So I'd like to go down back. If we go to country by country level, and like it or not, MDGs and SDGs share this same weight, I feel from my own unqualified personal point of view, that you still have to go back to the government to ensure implementation of many things. But even in this country, we always say that sometimes Malaysia has the best in the world policies, but implementation is key. So how, from MDG to SDG, that we have an alternative to not just this reliance, but also empower civil society, empower non-governmental organization, or even empower international organization that works for society and betterment of society and maybe the environment all over the world. So I would like to tap into your field of expertise in bringing academia into public policy, because sometimes many people around the world have the feeling that policies are made first and then only it's consulted to the academia or the scientists or civil society.
You're absolutely right. This has been the modus operandi. We create policy and then maybe somebody holds us accountable, whether it's academia or it's NGOs or it's business. That's also possible. Today, with more dynamic technology and communications, we are seeing other actors getting engaged, and we see academia take a totally different place at the table. On the issue of implementation, there are two ways of engaging. It is before the process of implementation, actually three, during and after. And the after process should not be forgotten, because that process empowers then even other actors to hold a mirror to the government and say, here is where we need more. I'll give you just one quick example. Worldwide, we have signed up to many environmental conventions, whether it's climate, biodiversity, desertification, wetlands, chemicals, and so on. We do not have an assessment of how countries have performed across these conventions. That doesn't exist. We started a project, a research project like that at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and we're creating an index of the environmental conventions.
How do we measure achievements?
Exactly, and I have to tell you, Malaysia is coming up really high on several of the conventions. If I had known that we will do this, I would have brought the index with me.
You can email me and you can come again.
We can, we can actually talk again, because we are showing a counterintuitive story and a positive story. Counterintuitive is that we think that developed countries will do better, and we're actually not necessarily. We see developing countries doing pretty well in several conventions. And it's a positive story because you can see that countries can learn from each other, from their neighbors, rather than from far-fetched
Before I go to the experience of Brazil, if it goes back to the government and the system that we have around the world, except for maybe a minority of countries, it's a 5-year election cycle. We're talking about 15 years, we're talking about maybe 30 years, and even until 2050. And some of the investment that will be made post MDGs, let's say next year in 2016, the result won't be measured fully until many, many more years after that. So how do you make a system that wants to win public opinion within 5 years work for medium and longer term sustainability? How do we work that into the governance process?
I don't know how you change the system on that count. The only thing I can say, you have to change the individuals. You have to change
society,
responsibility, individuals, and that's how you change society. Is the linkage between institutions and individuals is actually quite direct. Institutions perform well when the individuals within those institutions have a sense of responsibility and a sense of common good.
But civil society is crying out for change. So where's the stumbling block? Politicians? Political will was mentioned more than a few times by Her Excellency Irina Bokova in our panel discussions just now.
Political will doesn't come by itself. Political will is generated. Exactly. It is demanded. You have to. By the way, there is a saying, political will is when enough people say you will.
Your experience on the case of IPCC in Brazil?
I think Brazil in the last few years is doing well in terms of improving many areas in the environment. For instance, Brazil reduced deforestation in the tropics, in the Amazon, substantially, 80%, highest deforestation reduction all over the world. Also, because of that, we reduced emissions by 40%, and also the pressure against the pristine ecosystems, so reducing, also preserving more biodiversity. So Brazil is doing well. Why? Sometimes I think, why are we doing well? And as Brazil becomes more democratic and more democratic, remembering that until 1985, for 21 years, we experienced a radical extremist dictatorship, military dictatorship. So we're still young democracy, but it's becoming more and more democratic. Brazilians like nature. They like the environment. Polls taken internationally would always place Brazil first or second in terms of concern about climate change, concern about tropical forests, against deforestation. So I think finally the political world, the professional politicians realize that it's good. They will be voted if they adhere to these principles. That's why some of these policies are being able to be implemented. This is my first comment. The other comment I have from my own experience as a scientist working in government. So I think scientists have to be very patient, and we have to start working more closely with the political process and the policy process. And we can really work with them and maintain integrity, maintain neutrality. In fact, it's good for the process because we have careers. It's not a 5 or 4 year cycle, election cycle. So eventually, after many years working with them, they know that you're not part of the political fight, the election cycle, and you become a very important resort. So they learn to trust what you say because you're neutral, you don't have any vested interest, and you also learn how the political process is constructed, the constraints, etc. So it's a very positive relationship. So scientists should not only work in their laboratories, they should devote part of the time to work more closely with the policy process.
Thank you so much for still watching a special recorded session of Agenda Awani, and it's a privilege to sit here with eminent members of the Scientific Advisory Board to the Secretary General of the United Nations. I would like to go straight to the point I was alluding to just now. Okay, we've talked about the 5-year political election process, but another important stakeholder for sustainable development of the world, more and more the private sector-led economy and initiatives. How do we bring big, powerful entities that goes for profit into the dialogue and then, of course, the implementation of SDGs?
You're asking big questions, really big, really important questions, and a lot of people are thinking about these. We probably don't have the answers here, but we'll just share some thoughts. The way we bring all players to the table, I think, is by emphasizing what is the right thing to do. Because even a powerful company faces limits.
Okay.
Even Coca-Cola needs clean water to produce its products. Every company sees that there are limits to the operational space within which they function. And also every company is headed by individuals who also want to see this planet continue, whether it's for their children or whether it's for communities that they operate within. So I actually think that your profession is the absolute critical one in this equation. If you can articulate the message that politicians are making at the international level, that civil society is making at the local level, that we academics are trying to make in the classrooms and beyond, and that corporations will be likely to hear and act on, I think we will get there.
Professor, if we look at specifically at climate change and CO2 reduction, I think the industry plays a very important role, because their relationship with the policies of government, implementation of it, because this is directly to them impacting the bottom line, how much CO2 they can produce, and if they were to go cleaner, maybe they have to incur extra costs. And then there's the historical argument that the developed nations of the world has been emitting CO2 for the longest time in the biggest quantity as compared to us. Give us a bit more time to produce this much. How do you see all this argument in tandem?
But in fact, this is today, because of technology, innovation, and the scale, is not a relevant question anymore. Easily, renewable energy, just to mention one aspect, because 80% of CO2 emissions come from generating energy. You can really replace fossil fuel by renewable energy at competitive costs all over the world. Particularly developing countries like Malaysia and Brazil, they should more rapidly bring about renewable energy for their growth, economic growth needs. So but for that to happen, there has to be a transformation in educational systems.
Okay.
So it's not only, I think, as you correctly pointed out, companies in the capitalist system, they go after profits.
Okay.
So the people, educated people for sustainability, they should really be consumers will pick the sustainable consumption patterns, which would induce a change in the way companies behave. Of course, I mean, this question, central question of energy, is fundamental if we want to get to a safer future planet. You know, Malaysia, your country. If we warm the planet, and allow me, because your program is very high level, just to illustrate, because most people do not have that idea, which is very robust science. If we warm the planet, let's say 3 degrees, sea level will be rising for 1 to 2,000 years, and there is no way to stop it. Ice sheets in Greenland and partly in Antarctica will melt away. Over 1,000 years, sea level will rise between 3 and 7 meters. So think about maritime continent of Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand. You can't even think or unthinkable futures. So we have to do something about it, but it's not easy to ask the oil, fossil fuel, coal, natural gas companies to do it. So we really need a complete reversal of the way we see natural resources. And I think I do believe in education. I do believe in education for sustainability is the key really to change things profoundly and forever.
Will we achieve that within these SDGs?
Well, SDGs call for food security, water security, and energy security. So this food, water, energy nexus is not an easy one to solve. You could solve the energy security for all with fossil fuels. Yes. Yeah. So it's a lot of new knowledge needed, a lot of governance, as Professor Ivanova was saying. So it's a big challenge, I think, you know, for this future sustainability of the planet. Finding solutions for this nexus is probably the most difficult challenge.
And maybe we don't see it now, but if we have the opportunity to somehow look back from 2015, this might be the most pivotal changing point in the history of mankind, because maybe this is the first global initiative that looks strategically, inclusively at this particular issue of the day, if you like it. Thank you so much, Professor Ivanova and Professor Nobre, for making time to be here. Again, on behalf of all Malaysians, we would like to thank your imminent presence here in Kuala Lumpur, the first time ever for the sitting of the Scientific Advisory Board. And we look forward to September, when we will know for sure what are the main deliberations that will be picked to be chosen to move post-2015. And until then, thank you again. And thank you to you. Hantarkan pandangan anda sendiri kepada pelbagai platform yang Astro Awani ada, sama ada Facebook, Twitter, YouTube dan Instagram, ataupun terus muat turun aplikasi mudah alih iOS dan Android. Dan kita akan jumpa lagi dalam episod Agenda Awani yang lain. Sekian, selamat malam dan terima kasih. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.